WABC Mike disagrees. He has a different opinion. Mike, go ahead, please. You're on the radio.
How you doing, Dr. Savage? First-time caller, short-term. I just been listening to you for a couple of months, and I'm pretty addicted, to tell you the truth. I'm in law enforcement in the Northeast. I really don't want to say where, for obvious reasons, but I disagree with you completely as far as the whole everything that you disagree with that the cops did there. In particular, I know you're saying that they overreacted. They shouldn't have. I don't want to misspeak. I'm sorry, but basically, you're saying they used too much force. Am I correct?
Yes, excessive force.
Well, excessive force is this. When we're initiating an arrest, regardless of who this person is, we obviously race doesn't play a factor at all. Not to me, not to the guys in my squad. I don't care what color they are. I don't care where they're from. I'm initiating an arrest. An arrest is an arrest. I don't care how. I do evaluate the situation and how much of a threat the person is based on his size. If he has a gi on, like he's a professional fighter or he's a professionally trained fighter, I will take that into account. Is he reaching for his waistband? There's various things. Mr. Garner was a very large man. He was it looks like 3 times larger than those the two cops who were initiating the arrest.
Oh, hold on. Let's have a conversation. But he was a nonviolent man, and here's the second part. They knew him. That squad of cops knew Garner. They had arrested him many times before for selling cigarettes. They knew he was nonviolent. They knew he didn't pose a physical threat. So in that sense, it undermines where you're coming from. I recognize that without men like you, the country would be a total jungle. Unless we have men like you who have the guts to take down the vermin of our society, we're all finished. So I understand that. But what I'm asking you to consider here is the level of force required when a man is begging for his life. In other words, given that you need to exert a lot of power to bring down a guy 300 pounds that size, and he's down, why didn't they stop once he was on the ground and was no longer posing any threat whatsoever? Why could they not back off at that point?
Okay, my opinion on that, my professional opinion, my expertise on this, I've been in law enforcement almost 17 years. From what I saw, he said, no, I'm not going in, you're not locking me up. They reached for his hand. He pulled his hand away and slapped away the cop's hand. That right, he's obviously resisting. Now, once you're resisting, now we are trained to use force to negate your force. And being that he's a large man, I personally have been trained to use whatever means is necessary to take this person down. Yes.
All right, let's pause again at that juncture. I heard you. I respect what you said as a professional who has to do these things. But I again will ask you then, at what point do you decide how much force to use? Again, he had no guns, no knives. He did not clench a fist. He was not fighting with the officers. He was merely not wanting to be handcuffed. He was panicking at that point. I had a caller yesterday. You probably didn't hear it. He said, when we see a man this size, we cannot get cuffs on him at all because his wrists are too big. That's how big he was. And what we do in those cases, we bring what's called leg irons to lock his hands on because they're much bigger, obviously. The squad, knowing they were going to take down Garner, could have brought the leg irons, couldn't they?
No. The handcuffs fit fine. They actually expand quite a bit. What they may have had to do was get another pair because usually guys that size, you require a couple of sometimes 3 sets linked to each other because they can't bring the arms that far back. But standard size will fit probably. All
right, so let's say standard size fits all. Got it. But the bottom line is he's dead. So apparently they used excessive force.
Well, no. He is dead because he was told that he was under arrest and put.
All right, so you're blaming the victim then. He's the victim of, yes, he resisted arrest. We agree with that. But I still say that at that point, once he was on the ground and he couldn't breathe, don't you hear him begging for his life, saying, I can't breathe? What would you say at that point? Continue the pressure on him?
Dr. Savage, half the people I've arrested, actually probably more than half, have always complained, my leg hurts, I've heard I can't breathe so many times, I can't tell you. From 16-year-olds all the way up to, people in their 50s.
All right, so he deserved to die, in other words, because the police were just following orders.
Not, absolutely not. That man should be alive today.
No, the police were following protocol and orders. They did exactly the right thing. So why don't we give them all a commendation? Maybe they should get a freedom medal.
I'm just saying that.
No, give him a gold medal for performing a wonderful job of killing Eric Garner because he was such a threat to society. Look, I know guys like you keep us safe from the wolves. I get it. I've called you wolfhounds for years. Nobody respects police more than I do. But when something goes wrong like this, and it's in front of a grand jury, I have to blame the grand jury more than I do the cops. Because as I've said before, the job of a grand jury is not to assess whether the guy is innocent or guilty, not to decide whether he's right or wrong. The grand jury has only one job, and that is to find out, in their opinion, to determine, rather, if there is enough evidence to charge that defendant in that case. And I believe there was enough evidence of excessive force. You would argue there wasn't, based on your police protocols. And I don't think you're alone in that assessment. I would think that most cops listening to the show would agree with you.
Dr. Savage, the I can't breathe thing, I hear it all the time.
Yeah, but in this case, he was telling the truth.
Well, I'm not a doctor. My job is to protect my guys and myself from getting hurt. And in this case, they wanted to initiate an arrest.
All right, so then why don't we have the supervisor, the black lady sergeant who was standing in the doorway doing nothing, watching the whole incident? Why isn't she being called in front of a grand jury?
I don't know. There's no reason for. There's nothing for her to do. The cops were making the arrest. They got him down. He started saying, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe," which every cop has heard a million times.
Okay, but in this case, the guy was telling the truth, and he's dead. So maybe the cops have to be more sensitive to people who are physically or mentally slightly disabled.
How do I judge that? I have to protect. I have to enforce the law. My job is to enforce the law, and their job at that time was to initiate an arrest. That person refused to be arrested. They didn't hit him.
Mike, looking back, you've watched the videotape, right? The iPhone record. You've seen it, right?
Yes, sir.
If you were in that squad and you were part of the takedown and you saw the guy on the ground and he no longer was posing a threat, you could see the man was down like an animal, a helpless animal. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't punching. He wasn't biting. He wasn't spitting. You as a human being who has the intelligence to call a show, a national show, and do a very articulate job of presenting your side, would you have done anything differently?
Honestly, no. He was on the ground.
And how would you feel after the fact, knowing that he died from the takedown? How would you feel?
I would feel terrible. I would feel terrible. No cop goes to work and says, "I'm going to take somebody's life today." That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. There's obviously no intent there. There's absolutely no way there.
Right, but the grand jury was not determining whether there was intent. They were trying to determine whether grossly excessive force was used. On, by the way, a nonviolent, non-threatening individual who was crying and screaming for help because not only was he being taken down, but his chest was being compacted. I have another friend in police work who said, "Look, Mike, I really don't like to have to tell you this, but putting their knee against his back and crushing his lungs, compressing his lungs, could have killed him."
That's common procedure. Once a guy goes down, until he's cuffed, he's still a threat. You are a threat until you're handcuffed behind your back.
How could he have been a threat if there's 5 guys on him and he had no weapons? I don't understand that.
Well, Dr. Savage, we don't know if he has a weapon on him still.
Now, wait a minute. Now I disagree with you wholeheartedly because he was known to that squad. That was his neighborhood. They know he was a gentle giant, a harmless guy, selling a few cigarettes to make a few extra bucks for himself and his wife and his 6 kids. They knew he was not a violent guy. He was not a member of a gang selling drugs. But you make a very good point. You've made very good points. I think you've upheld your Brothers in Blues position better than anyone yet on this show. But I still disagree with you for one reason. He's dead. And I will send you a copy of Stop the Coming Civil War as a gift to you for being such an articulate man with the guts to express yourself. Thanks for being with us. I'll be right back.